Pierpaolo Finaldi is the CEO of the Catholic Truth Society, a regular guest on the WTN Global Catholic TV, a Catholic Herald, top 100 trailblazer Catholic, a husband and father of 7. Over to you.
Thank you. Now, I'm very happy to be able to speak from experience, in a sense, about the role of the father as the one who takes his family on the journey towards the Christian family's goal. And I'll speak in a little bit more detail about what that goal should be. But I want to kind of preface this. I think nobody's been too kind of, sort of unwarrantedly optimistic about the situation that we're in at the moment. Sebastian in particular, I would say. But I think I'm going to take it even further, if that's okay. There's no point kind of pretending that we're not in a huge crisis at the moment in terms of the church, in terms of Christianity, in terms of kind of Catholicism in this country and worldwide, in a sense. This last sort of year and a half, from the kind of first inklings of something weird going on in China at the beginning of last year to the ripples kind of going out into the world, have really kind of asked some pretty fundamental questions about what it is that the church believes, what it is that the church hierarchy or the institutional church kind of believes, and what it is that we as lay Catholics and as leaders of our domestic churches in particular, when it comes to fathers, what we believe. Many things have really upset me over the last 2 years that have happened in the life of the church. I think upset is a bit of a girly term. Many things have pissed me right off, right? In terms of what has happened in the church, or have taken me to righteous anger, I think. And one of the things that really, really got my goat was when one of the premier pilgrimage sites of the world, and one of my personal favourite places to go to in the whole world, the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes, closed its gates before the government imposed it upon it, in case some sick people would come to it. They closed their gates on the off chance that somebody who was ill could come to Lourdes and possibly pass on this illness. And for me, that was like a moment of real. It was a moment in which really kind of questioned lots of the ideas that I'd had about the heroism of the church in front of the world and all these kinds of things, and the baths in Lourdes that have been bathing people with the worst illnesses in the world for over 150 years, with not, as far as I know, not a single case of kind of people being being infected, cross-infected, closed its doors and shut its gates to the pilgrims. Another experience that I had last year, as CEO of the Catholic Truth Society, we have the privilege and the pleasure at the moment, especially, of being publishers to the Holy See. So we publish the documents of the Vatican at the moment, and we were asked to translate a document, the Directory for Catechesis. So this is a document which speaks about how catechesis should take place within parishes, within the family, within schools. And it was a great document. It was somewhat kind of wordy and a bit kind of there's a lot of jargon in it, but I think we did a good job with the translation. And that document particularly spoke about how we need a charismatic catechesis, a missionary catechesis, a catechesis which speaks to people about the good news. Okay, and so I took on a wonderful Catholic gentleman, Peter Williams. I don't know if you know him. Do follow him on Facebook if you don't. He's always got interesting things to say. I hired him to kind of market this thing to the diocese of the country. And this was in kind of June, July last year. And I gave him a list of every single diocesan office in the country that was in charge of catechesis and evangelization. And he began phoning up. The institutional church in Great Britain was not at home. It was closed for business. It was passing all calls to voicemail. In a moment in which the entire country was living in fear of illness, in fear of death, the institutional church, with a very few exceptions, was nowhere to be found. Now, this is a huge scandal in a sense. But if I have a quite a naturally sunny disposition, and I thank God for that. In that, what we suddenly saw was the domestic church come to the fore. The institutional church was closed. You couldn't get a sacrament for love nor money. But what was available was the domestic church, was the passing on of the faith in your family. And I think it was providential that this thing hit during like the strongest liturgical time of the year. The church is closed during Lent, and we were able, I hope, to see our families through this kind of very strong period of the church, to follow the story of the most dramatic moments of the story of Jesus Christ in his death and resurrection. I think we will never forget we celebrated a kind of Easter vigil of sorts in our house, and I think both I and my children will never forget. It was a moment of great grace. I presided over this kind of vigil, and the singing was excellent. The choice of music was impeccably tasteful. The preaching was, I agreed with every single word of it. And I think the kids will remember this moment. It was the moment in which, out of an evil, or out of a situation out of which so much evil has come, so much suffering has come, God was able to kind of raise up something good, something fundamental, because I'm speaking particularly to the fathers, to future fathers. You cannot outsource the passing on of the faith to your children, to anyone. It is your God-given right and duty to pass on the faith as you received it. And maybe you didn't receive it in that great a way from your teachers or your parish priest or whatever. But God, you have at the moment at your disposal, through so many kind of different resources, through so many different experiences that you can have, you can receive the faith and pass it on integrally in your family and by example. Okay? So I think this was such an important moment in which the domestic church really came to the fore. And I thank God that I myself had been brought up in a very strong domestic church, and I was able to kind of in one sense take up that baton for that period of time. So I think that's important to say that. Now, obviously, liturgical life in and of itself was lacking. I didn't do any masses or try and consecrate anything at home, even though I'm the bishop of my domestic church. I know my limits, but we were able to do something. But I think we're going to speak. We've been asked to speak about pilgrimage, and I think it's a very important thing to speak about, because it's something which really suits the domestic church. It's very interesting that I was looking at some of the stats for Lourdes, and even before the debacle of the closure of 2020, there was a very interesting kind of statistic that parish organised pilgrimages have been declining at Lourdes. In fact, over the past, I think, 10 years, there's been a decline of somewhere, I think it's in the region of 30% in terms of organised pilgrimages. The only type of pilgrimage which has grown is the family pilgrimage. So there's been a 14% increase of families just going to Lourdes as a family, as a pilgrimage. And I think that's a great sign of hope and a word to the wise. That's the way things are going. Now, so what can we say about the way that a family should undertake a pilgrimage, and why we should undertake a pilgrimage as a family? I mean, we growing up as an Italian as an Anglo-Italian, I think earlier Jeremy said we live from mass to mass, whereas Anglo-Italians live from holiday to holiday. We look forward to that moment when we can finally kind of leave the grey skies and arrive in the heat of Italy. And yet, I think what we realised quite early on, both in the family that I grew up in and with our own children, that a holiday is not enough. It's very nice and everything, but every holiday needs to be kind of sanctified. So we would always make sure that whenever we go on holiday, a couple of days are dedicated to pilgrimage. When you go to Italy, you've got you're spoiled for choice. So one year we decided to do a kind of Benedictine pilgrimage. We went to Subiaco and we went to what's it called, Monte Cassino. Another year, we stopped a couple of days in Assisi and did the sort of Franciscan pilgrimage. Another year, we stopped in Assisi and ignored St. Francis and did St. Clair. My wife's called Chiara, so that worked out beautifully. But in a sense, what you need, what was at the root of that was that you need to bring your family to a place of encounter with God. And so just I think maybe we can go back and look at the kind of pilgrimage par excellence, the journey par excellence in the Bible, and see that in the book of Exodus, what is it that the Israelites are doing? What is it that they ask permission to Pharaoh to do? And Moses is asked to go to the Pharaoh and asked to let the people go so that they can give worship to God in the desert. So that journey, at the heart of that journey, is a moment of kind of worship of God. And so go to Pharaoh, it says in Exodus 8:1, and say to him, "Thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me." And Sebastian was talking earlier on about how important it is for us to get out of this this kind of way of thinking that our faith is in some way lived in our head, is lived in our imagination. No, Christ was incarnated and was born in a particular place at a particular time. And that particular place and that particular time has significance in our story. And all the places that you can visit have a particular significance in our story as Christians. And why is it that we are called to go to a particular place? And I think, God knows us very well. The church is the expert in humanity, the documents say. Knows very well that we at home are kind of assaulted by the problems, by the little things of every day. And we find it very difficult to move out of the problems of every day and to get into that kind of headspace where we can have a meeting with God. I always laugh that for me, saying the family rosary is fine. It's a pleasure. It's getting everyone into the same room to say the family rosary, which just kills me. Because it's like, as soon as you say it, it's like, okay, I just need to do this, just need to, everyone disappears. You need to wash that plate, you need to kind of go to the toilet, and all the little things of our little everyday life. When we're on pilgrimage, those are kind of moved out, that we kind of get rid of those and we can focus on God. And I'll only refer to this kind of document from the church. There was a document in the year 2000 called the Pilgrimage of the Great Jubilee. And it's quite an interesting document. And it takes this idea of the tent of the presence of God. It says what we do when we go on pilgrimage is we're going to a place where we can have this meeting with God. It said pilgrimages have as their goal the tent of personal meeting with God and with oneself. Lost in the multiplicity of daily anxieties and realities, people need to discover themselves through reflection, meditation, through reflection and meditation, prayer and an examination of conscience and silence. All things which are really difficult to do at home or in our mind. So we need to go out. We need to go out of our daily grind, and we need to kind of make this journey to a place where there is the tent of the presence of God. The Israelites went into the desert and there had a strong experience of God's providence. The desert is the place where Israel fell in love with the Lord. We read in Jeremiah, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness. And I think any of us who have been or who have had a strong kind of experience of pilgrimage, of those moments in which all the other things kind of went out of focus and only God was there, have this memory of the moment in which only God was important. And we kind of look back on those moments as moments of, like the beautiful moments that you had when you were courting your wife or whatever. You know, those are the moments in which we fell in love. I remember that very clearly for myself. I used to go a lot to the kind of World Youth Days. No, we had these big pilgrimages where we would walk, huge distances to kind of meet together. Moments of intense prayer, and those moments were really the moments in which you fell in love with the Lord. Okay. And they're the moments in which we kind of make a pledge that God says, you shall be my people and I shall be your God. So I think it's really important for us to provide these moments to our families, Far more important than the beautiful beach or the 5-star hotel or anything like that will be those moments in which you took them to a place of prayer or a place of beauty where you could meet up with God, where you could fall in love with God. And it's interesting, I mean, we're coming to the end of the year of St. Joseph. I'm not quite sure how much it really kind of took off. We went on a little pilgrimage with my family, with my brother-in-law's family, to the shrine of St. Joseph, which is down in Farnborough Abbey, just to do a little kind of pilgrimage of thanksgiving to St. Joseph. And reflecting on St. Joseph, it's interesting. I mean, everyone always says St. Joseph was a man who didn't say a word during the gospel. We don't know of anything that he actually said. But we do know a little bit about what he did. And in fact, we know his job, and we know one thing that he did. And it says in the Gospel of Luke, he says that Jesus lived under his parents' authority, and we only know one thing that they made him do, and that was to go on pilgrimage. Yeah? It says in Luke, every year his parents used to go to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up for the feast as usual. And then we know the only story of Jesus's of the infancy narratives between Jesus' birth and his public ministry. We know of that story. So they obviously felt a pilgrimage was an incredibly important part of their life. Whether we have kind of criticisms of how closely they looked after their child is maybe up for discussion. But they did notice that he was missing after 3 days, I think it was. And it's interesting that when they find Jesus and they find him in the temple, and Jesus says to his parents, who, were not kind of spiritually inconsequential people, he said, I must be busy with my Father's affairs, but they did not understand what he meant. And I think this speaks to something that when you go on a pilgrimage, especially when you go on a pilgrimage with your children, God is speaking to them without your mediation sometimes. Yeah, there will be things that happen during the pilgrimage. There will be experiences that the children will have, that they will want to undertake, which are not, you may not fully understand, but you kind of have to leave them to have their own relationship with what's happening. Last time we came here, I think it was last year in the October half term, I think we came here, and I was telling the children the story of the Slipper Chapel, and we wanted to drive back up to lunch, and the children were like, well, if the Slipper Chapel is where you leave your shoes, then presumably you have to walk back up without any shoes on. And they just said, okay, we want to do that. And, in a sense, as a parent, you have to kind of, if they have those kinds of intuitions, you have to leave it, you have to let them express their kind of piety in that way. And I was very encouraged by that. Now, in terms, these are moments in which the domestic church has, they're moments in which the domestic church has strengthened, the moments of experience of the love of God. What they also are moments in which the mission of the family can be kind of brought into focus. And I think this is very important. As a father in particular, it's a bit like being like this, the CEO of a company or something. You have to set the mission of the organization. Yeah? You're the one who has to kind of, in a sense, speak to the family as to what the family's mission is, what the family's journey is. One of my favourite verses from the Bible is the verse from the book of Joshua, when the people of Israel, having had this great experience during the desert, and they go through these huge kind of ups and downs, moments of fidelity and faith, and moments of murmuring and abandonment of God. It comes round once again, and the people of Israel are asked to kind of make a choice, whether they'll serve God or whether they'll serve the idols and go back to the comfort of Egypt. And Joshua speaks on behalf not only of himself, but he speaks on behalf of his family. He says, as for me and my house, he says, you guys, you go away, you go, you leave the Lord. He says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Okay, and I think that is the mission statement of every father in to be able to stand in front of God, in front of the world, in front of the faithlessness of the church in some moments, and say, you do what you want. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And this, what starts kind of here with Joshua in terms of his church, the domestic church of Joshua and his house, continues in the New Testament. And I think, we've spoken. We often speak about the crisis of the church. We have a way of looking often at the church which is quite kind of Eurocentric, and I think it's fair, because obviously we're here and Europe has a very important relation to the church. But I think it's good sometimes to think, now, what can we say about the church in the old continent, that can give us some hope, that can give us something to kind of hold on to in this moment in which it seems that the whole of Europe is apostatizing at a kind of incredible rate. And going back to the book of Acts, in fact, this morning, I don't know if you heard in that first reading that St. Paul spoke about the church that meets in the house of this one and that one. And so we saw, those very very important domestic churches at the beginning. But it's very interesting that when you read in Acts 16, you're following the journey of Paul from Palestine up through kind of Asia, and then in chapter 16 he crosses into Europe for the first time. He crosses into Europe for the first time, and two things happen immediately. So the first thing is that he meets Lydia. Lydia, it seems, is a widow, and she is baptized together with her whole household. And then he gets put into prison, Paul, and then there's this miraculous, the prison opens, and in the morning the jailer comes and finds that the prison is open. He thinks I'm going to be executed, and then he finds that Paul and Barnabas are still there sitting in this open jail. And they say, no, don't kill yourself. Listen to the good news. And the jailer, the first thing he does is he says to them, what must I do to be saved and become a believer? And he says, St. Paul says to him to be baptized along with his whole household. So it's interesting that the very first Christians in Europe are families, are people who are baptized together with their families. The first with Lydia, and the second with the jailer. I can't remember if we know his name or not. But the evangelization of Europe began with families, with households, and I think the re-evangelization of Europe will do the same thing. Okay, and this is our mission. This is our mission, especially as fathers, as leaders of the domestic church, to re-evangelize Europe, beginning with the family. When we know very much that the family is under such attack and under such pressure in this in this time. So to take our children out, to take our children away, to have this meeting with God is something also that Jesus Christ himself knew was an effective way to speak to his disciples. When he brought his disciples or the people that he wanted to speak, he would always take them out of the cities and he would speak to them about the things that were going to happen, the big things, his death, his resurrection. And there's that wonderful scene of the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes with him Peter and James and John, and he takes them up a high mountain, to be by themselves. There's so many pilgrimage sites have these incredible upper mountain. I particularly remember Monte Cassino. You go up there and you just see the whole of Lazio basically out in front of you, and you're there. And what was the reaction of Peter, James and John at that moment? They said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, we'll make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." They want to stay in that place. They'd want to stay there forever, just looking at Christ blazing in glory, flanked by the prophets. This is our experience often in places of pilgrimage. That feeling of wanting to stay there forever. I remember going to Lourdes last time, and we stayed there for a few days. We went on a kind of Thanksgiving pilgrimage for our 20th wedding anniversary. It was my parents-in-law's 40th wedding anniversary, and my brother-in-law's 10th. And we thought, let's go and give thanks for these marriages. And we were there, and the bells were ringing, and you'd stop for prayer every 5 minutes, and there were all these wonderful things to do and see, and beautiful countryside. And it was one of those moments of it is good for us to be here. I want to stay here. And yet that feeling that returning to normal life, which is kind of boring and colourless in comparison, is important. It's really important. In fact, it's almost as important as that feeling, that enthusiastic feeling of being there. Because what we can do in that is instill in our children a healthy dissatisfaction with our earthly life, and a longing for the things of heaven. That's such an important kind of thing to instill, that we're not made for this world. We're not made for this world. No matter how beautiful the nature is, no matter how wonderful the experiences are, no matter how great a party is or a celebration, in the end, it's nothing in comparison to what we can experience in heaven. Another thing that really always struck me was that in the World Youth Day in Cologne, which was prepared by John Paul II, but then he died, and it was Pope Benedict who actually who took the kind of World Youth Day there back in his home country in Germany. The cathedral in Cologne contains the relics of the three wise men, essentially. So the great cathedral in Cologne is a place of veneration of these three pagans who were kind of among the first to go and worship Christ. And what John Paul II says is that in the gospel we hear they departed. So they have this dream. There's a beautiful little French carving there of the three wise men asleep, and the angel comes down. You see they've got the little star above them there. The angel comes down and tells them about Herod's dastardly plot, and tells them to go home by a different route. And they departed to their own country by another way. The gospel tells us that after their meeting with Christ, the Magi returned home by another way, says John Paul II. This change of route can symbolize the conversion to which all those who encounter Jesus are called in order to become the true worshippers that he desires. And in a sense, that's always the aim of a pilgrimage, is to return by a different route. That you yourself have been changed by this experience, and that you go home a different person. You've understood something about yourself, you've understood something about the faith, you've understood something about Jesus Christ, by going on this pilgrimage, and you return a different person by a different route. Something that I said before about how important it was for pilgrimages. So because pilgrimages, what do? You pray, you eat together, you spend time, and you can speak in a much more kind of natural way about the things of God with the family, either traveling. And I think it's so important to be able to give that direction, that mission of the family, to set those parameters on a pilgrimage, remembering that we have a mission as Christians, and in particular we have a mission as Christian families. And what is our mission? You can't help but be noticed as a Christian family. You do different things. Yeah, you have different priorities. You have different you have different habits, hopefully. When you walk around, I don't know, I mean, nowadays, even if, you walk 3-4 children, it's a spectacle. It's something that people see. If we walk into church sometimes, a bench isn't enough anymore. And it's a wonderful thing, but in the end, it's also a responsibility, because people are looking at you, and people are saying, okay, these guys think they're Christians. Let's see what they're really like. What kind of people are they? Yeah, are they the same shits as everybody else, or are they different? Because this is the power of attraction. This is the power of the gospel. Do they love one another? Is the world looking at you and saying, look how they love one another, or are they looking at you and they're saying they're worse than everybody else? And we know very well what the scandals that have enveloped the church have been such an obstacle to people, that we need to provide different examples. And this is the mission of the family. If in business, if you don't have an aim, if you don't have an aim that you want to get to and a time frame within which you want to do it, things won't get done. So what is it that you want to do with the family? What is it that we, as the Finaldi family, the Morello family, the Pilgrim, whoever, what is it that we are here to do? We're in the world, but not, we will serve the Lord. We're in the world, but not of it. And we have a loyalty to what the family does, to the project of the family. The project of the family, which is the sanctification of the world in which we live. That is our project. That is our project. And anything that we do which goes to the detriment of that project needs to be kind of sorted out at a management level. Mum and dad need to hold each other to account, and need to hold the whole family to account for this. And it's so important to speak about the family as a unit which has a mission, which has a rule, which has in a sense, it has a kind of a constitution. This is what we do as a family. Yeah, the idea, there's no question of not going, some members of the family not going to mass or whatever it is. We have a rule as a family, and this is how it goes, and we have a mission. So I think I'd like to just move on to a few practical pointers for family pilgrimages. So as I was saying, don't plan too much. Leave some space for providence. Yeah. Make sure that every pilgrimage has a penitential aspect. Yeah. Make sure that there's the possibility of going to confession, and make sure that happens at the beginning of or before a pilgrimage, because we need to be cleared of all the kind of sins, of all the infighting before we can go and give our bring our sacrifice to the altar. And I mean, places like Lourdes, etc., are exceptional. There's priests there, just practically 24/7 there just to give confessions. But we organised. I think last year we really would have wanted to go to a Marian shrine abroad, but we couldn't. We had to stay in London, so we phoned up the shrine of Our Lady up in northwest London, organised with Father Lawrence. In fact, he did a little penitential service for our family, heard our confessions, and then we were able to kind of carry on with our pilgrimage there. But that's really kind of fundamental to do that. And the other thing is that we need to find out what the kind of activities are that you do in this place, because there's nothing more incarnational than a pilgrimage. I mean, Lourdes is fantastic for that. It's like touch that, drink that, eat that. It's all these kind of these things which you just it's not in your mind. It really isn't. Walk there. And those are so important, and it's the same here. And this question of returning by a different route, I find that it's very useful after a pilgrimage to kind of have a moment of recollection with the family, to ask what it is that everybody has kind of experienced during that period or during that time, what it is that they've understood better, because it was really interesting when I used to do the sort of tours of all the parishes in Southwark, and we'd go and when I was working with Sebastian and Theo, we'd go and talk to catechists and stuff. And often I would ask them, tell me. So, for example, we used to have to speak to extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist, and sometimes I would ask them, okay, tell me what your strongest experience of the Eucharist has been in your life. And people just could not really answer that. They just didn't have the vocabulary to speak about their experiences of kind of moments of important moments in the faith. And it's amazing when you read Newman, or you read Seven Storey Mountain. These people are kind of thinking all the time about what was their experience of listening to the Word of God, of encountering Christ in the Eucharist or in the church, and like or St. Augustine. I'm rereading the Confessions at the moment. He's thinking in extraordinary detail about these little things that happened to him when he was like, in his childhood. Those pears. Why did I take the pears? Was it for this? Was it for that? And we've got out of this habit. We just kind of live our life. We don't reflect on the things, but we need to kind of be able to instill in our families and our children a way of actually speaking about our experiences. Because once we articulate them, they can become testaments of God's kind of action in your life, that you will remember, that you'll be able to kind of recount, that you will be able to kind of go back to in those moments of difficulty. You'll say, no, I may have a bit of a crisis at the moment, but I remember when Our Lady was so close to me in that moment when we went to Lourdes, or whatever it happened to be. Good. So, I think we've been through the sort of questions of prayer and of I think we've mentioned them, but it's really important that to instill these prayers in the family at an incredibly early stage. You cannot wait. You're like, but they're only little, they don't really understand at the moment. Let's start praying, when they can understand, when they're 7, or it's just too late by then. It'll come out of nowhere, and they won't understand what's going on. So you have to start early, really early. One of my great pleasures as a father, I'm not sure how I got into this, but it just kind of stuck. So I put the kids to bed always, and I start saying the Hail Mary with the children from before they can speak. And you start, and then all of a sudden you see that they'll finish each sentence. They learn that word, and then there's a couple more words, and before you know it, they know the whole prayer. And for them, it's something that's just been there forever. So that's really, really important. And the way that we pray, it's a bit much overused maxim, but the way that we pray is what we believe. So you want your family to have a devotion to the Virgin Mary, you have to pray to the Virgin Mary. It's just like simple things. The other great thing is that one of the things that the Rob Baranoff often speaks about this is that one of the major reasons that young people in particular, say that they stop or that they lose their faith is because of unanswered prayer. I prayed for Granny when she was ill and she died anyway, so what's the point? But if you start praying with the children very early, and you encourage them to ask for things, and you tell them, you can deal with these problems of kind of unanswered prayer kind of quite early on, and they stop. They're not such a big problem later on. You can talk about the will of God. You can talk about what God wants for us. We asked for this, but we got something different, and that was better. God knows what we need more than we know ourselves. So that's kind of important. And among the many, many pages of Amoris Laetitia, I've managed to find a good bit here. And it says, moments of family prayer and acts of devotion can be more powerful for evangelization than any catechism class or sermon. So just remember that. And I think, Sebastian, you're incredibly in tune with Pope Francis on this, I think, from your talk. And the other thing, I think, is that, and this is something that Jeremy spoke about as well, is the sacramental life of the family is incredibly important, and that it's incredibly important that the sacramental life of the family takes place as a family. And that goes through not just going to Mass altogether, no matter how difficult that is. You were speaking about that earlier. I love that meme, it says, whoever wrote the song, "Easy Like Sunday Morning" was definitely not preparing children to go to mass. That's for sure. That the sacraments are our ordinary means of salvation. God can work in many other ways, but you want your family to be saved, we bring them to the sacraments. And that everything in your life takes second place to those sacraments. Everything if your kid wants to do American football or tennis, and they meet from 10 till 12 on Sunday morning, you don't do tennis. That's just how it goes. The mass, the family mass that we attend as a family, not the family, that is the most important thing. The other thing that I've found extremely important, and in fact you brought this up, confession as a family is also very important. And one of my previous employers, he used to say something very good. He said, confession has become the sacrament for naughty children. Yeah? And it's got nothing to do with the adults. Whereas if you go with your family to confession, and you as a father are the first one to go and kneel down and ask forgiveness for your sins, your many sins, your children will follow suit and will understand that you are not like a big horrible boss man, but you yourself are taking orders from someone much greater. I think that's incredibly important. So I think that's probably it. And just as Sebastian was talking earlier about these stats for of how important it is for fathers to take a lead in their family, in the life of faith. And this study in Switzerland was amazing. So they looked at a retention of people in the practice of the faith who had different situations in the family. And if only the mother practices, only 2% of children actually continued in the practice of the faith. I mean, the number is shocking. If the mother and father practice together, then a third of children will practice regularly. However, if only the father practices, 44% of the children will practice regularly. So I gave a talk to my mother runs a sister organisation, I think, of Catholic men in the UK. She runs Catholic Mothers, and I gave a talk to their conference, and I said to the mothers, I said, look, if you want your children to remain in the faith and your husband practices, the best advice I can give you is just stop going to church. That's the best way. But I mean, it just shows you just how important it is for us to take this seriously. And my brother sent me this morning, almost as if what we're doing here is fits into some kind of higher plan or something. The reading this morning from St. Ambrose in the liturgy in the Office of Readings, he said this: death in this sense is a pilgrimage, a lifetime's pilgrimage which none must shirk, a pilgrimage from decay to imperishable life, from mortality to immortality, from anxiety to unruffled calm. Do not be afraid of the word death, rather rejoice in the blessings which follow a happy death. What is death, after all, but the burial of vice, the flowering of goodness? And in a sense, what's our project? What's our ultimate project? We can have all sorts of projects, being an example, the light of the world, re-Christianizing Europe. But in the end, what we're here to do is to bring our children, our families to heaven. Not to be afraid of death, because in the end, that is what brings us to a greater relationship with Christ. And if the church had just said that in front of the coronavirus, it would have been enough. Just say that. Yeah, that in the end, that's the most important thing. All the sufferings of this world are nothing in comparison to what awaits us. And as a father, as a leader of your family, what greater adventure can you ask for? So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Who's first?
No questions about purgatory, right? It's like way beyond my pay grade, okay?
I do have one that might... Sorry, it's me again. I agree with you, the church's closing was shocking and appalling and just show our bishops don't really believe a word they preach. They don't even preach it. But the point is, well, it's true. It seems to me, though, one good argument, I don't agree with it, but it would have been, given the hysteria around coronavirus, what would have happened if they hadn't closed? We'd have had people firebombing churches saying, "You're killing Grandma. She wanted to go to Mass, and you didn't close the church, and now she's dead, and we blame you." So I think the bishops, I don't know what they would have done if they hadn't done this. It's cowardly. Maybe they should have taken the heat, but come on, they were never going to, were they?
I don't know. One of them could. We did have one. During the Reformation, we did have one bishop who remained faithful. No, I don't know. I mean, look, in the end, it went how it went. I think we're paying the consequences. We're seeing an incredible kind of. We moved down, the downward slope of church attendance. We moved probably like 10 years, in a year. But in the end, it's kind of, it's in a sense, it's my problem. It's not my problem. I'm called to bring my family. As Joshua said, me and my family. We will serve the Lord. Yeah, the rest of them, they'll have to pay for their own mistakes, I think.
Can I just very, very quickly speak to that point?
Yeah.
One thing that would have been good is to campaign in Parliament for essential service status. If you could show that you could do all the social distancing measures and everything, which they proved they could, and at a catechetical level, that would have indicated that church leaders thought that there was something essential about the true religion. So that would have been a start.
I mean, they kind of got to that in the end. No, I mean, the second time around. Luca?
Yeah, that was not a bad talk.
Thanks, bro.
No, the question really is, how do you see the relationship between husband and wife? You spoke a lot about father. How do you see that in the context of what you're talking about? Like, how is that to be supported? And because sometimes I have this idea that maybe that needs to come first, in a sense, before the other things.
Oh yeah. No, I think the fact that the family and particularly the Christian family is like a joint project, okay, is absolutely kind of fundamental. It kind of goes without saying. I'm sorry if I didn't say it, but the fact that so hence why it's so important to to marry a Catholic woman or somebody with whom that project can be kind of realized, and that that it's your project, so that that like when you go into that marriage, that you have you're going towards the same goal. I mean, all credit to people who kind of struggle along without that, and I find it difficult enough with a wife who's makes me look like an extremely kind of wishy-washy Catholic. I find it difficult enough, but even with both of you kind of pulling in ever so slightly different directions towards the same goal, it can be difficult. But I think I'd love to speak to clarify a bit more that distinction that Sebastian made about power and authority in the family, often I get slightly annoyed when I get used as like a kind of like a threat to the children, but it works. So you know, I think it's kind of useful, and I think it was good to hear that. But yeah, I think all of this is built on that foundation, definitely.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Great talk. In some ways, though, the premises of a lot of your talk are sort of based on almost like a first best world of, you know, a committed family.
Yeah.
I don't know. You've probably got younger children. I've got 4, and in a way, the horse has bolted a bit. Although signs of hope, I won't bore you with that. But I suppose, what advice would you give to where you're not starting in that kind of first best world? I do baptism preparation to first-time parents. I can kind of say some of those things. But, you know, not fully committed, not on fire. Is it a case of just start small as a father, you know, maybe grace before meals or a prayer before bed? Because if they're so far away from the ideal, you know, you're not even in that space where you can bring them on pilgrimage or... so what would be your advice in that being in the desert in a different sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, so your children kind of old? Have you kind of come to it later or something with older children?
No, actually, soberingly, we did a lot of those things. And I remember my wife saying to a priest when we were discussing, you know, I wouldn't have done anything different, and look where they are now. Actually, things have got better. I think it is a long game.
Yeah.
You know, actually, the kid who doesn't want to, he's very resistant at 16, might be much more open. Yeah. When they're 22, and I remember from 2 years ago, Sebastian's excellent point about your power as a father might diminish, but your authority can continue to grow, and maybe actually have a step change. Yeah. You know, so it's a long game, and you know, keeping those options open.
Yeah,
but,
no, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say a couple of things. One is that, you know, God is not disinterested in the ultimate fate of your children, and you know, the prayer of parents is so important. You know, what does St Ambrose say to you know the mother of St Augustine? You know, how could the child of so many tears you know, do anything but be saved? And so I think that becomes our mission might kind of change at a certain point if we're not able to speak to them or to bring them along in that way. The second thing is that you have to remember that there's this great line, though, that God has no grandchildren. Yeah, your children are not the children of God through you, but through baptism. Yeah, they become children of Him directly, and you know they need to discover this for themselves. You know, but do play the long game, and in the end, you know, your children, they don't give a stuff what you say. They care what you do. And so if you live a holy life, if you change, if you show a true kind of conversion, this will speak to them kind of eventually. You know, that will speak to them far more than anything that we can say. It's interesting, going back to St Augustine, I was you know, he tells the story about when his parents save up money to send him off to Carthage to learn rhetoric. And he says, my parents made so many sacrifices so that I could have, you know, a honeyed tongue, but they didn't care about whether, you know, I was thrown into you know, terrible vice or occasions of sin. And you know, that's a damning thing for a child to say about his parents, who had what they thought were the very best intentions for their children, made great sacrifices for him to go and become a rhetorician, which I think, you know, bore fruit in the end, you know, I think, as one of the greatest writers in history. But I think that's something that we need to think about also the choices that we make for our children, that we need to prioritize those things which will help them in their relationship with God, and put to one side the things that might lead them astray. University, for example, is it, sending them far away, is that putting them in harm's way or not? And don't just because everyone does it doesn't mean it's a good idea. One thing. So.
Well, thank you very much.